All right, welcome back to ABA Exam Review, where we are continuing our RBT Exam series with our latest practice exam. As always, if you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. One of your students shows signs of frustration when answering questions incorrectly. Part of the problem is the student does not think long enough about the question that was posed. What measurement will be best to use to increase the amount of time the student thinks about a question they were asked before answering? All right, so measurement question, and we are looking at some sort of continuous measurement here. So when you have measurement questions, the most important thing you need to do is first identify your behavior, and then you're identifying what am I trying to measure? What am I trying to increase? What am I trying to decrease? We know this student is frustrated when answering questions incorrectly. Specifically, the student does not think long enough about the question that was posed. So not thinking long enough, right? We're already thinking some sort of time measurement. Question says, what measurement is best to increase? So we need to increase something. The amount of time the student thinks about a question. And then importantly, they were asked before answering. So question is asked. We need to increase the amount of time they think before they respond. In other words, we have a SD, which is the question. We want to increase the time between that SD and the response. What kind of measurement are you looking for? A, inter-response time. Well, inter-response time is time in between responses. We're not measuring time in between thinking. We're measuring time in between the SD, the question, and the response. So what we're looking for is B, latency, because we have an SD, we have our question, and we're going to measure the length of time it takes for the student to respond to the SD, because we want to increase that length of time. In other words, we want to increase how long the student is thinking. So why isn't it duration? Because we're not measuring specifically how long the student is thinking out of context, right? We're measuring really the time in between question being asked and then the student responding, right? Because we want to increase the amount of time the student thinks about a question. If we're just measuring thinking without any context, we're not really specifying when we want to increase that thinking. So if you have an SD and then a target response, and you're measuring the time in between that SD and the response, latency is going to be a better unit of measurement. And then, of course, rate is frequency in time. We don't have a frequency, so we're not going to use rate. What we're using is going to be latency, time in between the SD and the response. The SD being the question posed, the response being the student's answer. And we want to increase that amount of time in between the SD and the response. A team of behavior analysts and behavior technicians attend a meeting at the local elementary school. The school wants advice on behavior management, specifically on strategies that can prevent behavior from occurring. What type of strategies is this school seeking? So we have a school who is consulting with the behavior analyst and the behavior technicians. And specifically, what do they want? Well, they want advice on behavior management on strategies that can prevent behavior from occurring. So remember, typically we have antecedent interventions and consequence interventions. With antecedent interventions, we are intervening before a behavior happens. We're implementing preventative measures. We're trying to prevent behavior from occurring. Once that behavior occurs, now we have to react and we have to use consequence interventions. This school is specifically looking to prevent behavior. So what type of strategy are they seeking? A, antecedent strategies. Yes, antecedent strategies are preventative, right? We want to prevent the behavior from occurring, and we're going to use antecedent strategies to do that. So antecedent manipulation, environmental manipulation, non-contingent reinforcement, along those lines. B, consequence strategies are reactive. So the behavior occurs, we react with the consequence. We're not looking for reactive strategies. We're looking for preventative strategies. C, punishment. Well, punishment is a consequence, right? And we're not using consequences. And then D, reactive strategies. Again, we are preventing behavior. We're trying to use preventative strategies. Reactive strategies, consequence strategies, punishment strategies are all the same thing. The school is seeking antecedent strategies to prevent behavior from occurring. You've been working on helping a client learn to dress themselves independently for 2 months. The client successfully put their shirt on by themselves 3 days in a row. On the 4th day, however, the client started to struggle, so the client's mom put the shirt on for the client. The client now only puts the shirt on with mom's help. What has most likely occurred? So let's think about this question. There's a lot going on, right? So we know you've been trying to teach a client to dress independently. We know the client successfully put the shirt on by themselves 3 days in a row, so they accomplished their goal. However, on the 4th day, the client was struggling. So what did the client's mom do? Well, she put the shirt on for the client. So essentially, client struggled, mom prompted, right? Some sort of physical prompt, okay? All the way completely assisting the client in putting that shirt on. So now the client only puts the shirt on with mom's help. So what's changed? And that's what you have to ask yourself in this question. What has changed? Well, the only thing that's changed from independence to non-independence is this mom's help, is the prompting. So what has most likely occurred? A, the client is engaging in escape behavior from putting on the shirt. Well, no, the client is still putting the shirt on, right? They're still going through the process. They're not trying to escape completely from putting the shirt on. That's not the issue. B, the client has demonstrated regression. Regression isn't measurable. It's not observable. We're not going to describe a lack of skill, right? Or lack of desired response as regression. It's mentalistic. We're just not going to use that word to describe what happened because we need to find a more objective and measurable reason for why it happened. Why it happened, likely because the only thing that's changed is the prompt, is the client became prompt dependent. Prompt dependency occurs when a client or a learner relies on prompts to get things done. And that's what happened here. Client was fine, independent, started receiving prompts, and now is waiting for those prompts to occur before they put their shirt on. That's a problem. D, the client is manipulating his mom. Again, manipulating is not observable. It's not measurable. We can't reliably see that and measure that. We need to pick something that we can reliably observe, reliably measure, and that is going to be the client has become prompt dependent because the only really thing that's truly changed, right, is the prompt in this scenario. So you've got to ask yourself, what changed in this scenario? What could cause this? Regression and manipulation are subjective, right? We don't want to talk in subjectives. We want to be objective. And objectively, the only thing that changed is the prompt. You report to your supervising behavior analyst that a parent is confused about the new behavior plan, specifically the extinction procedure and requested parent training. Your analyst tells you to conduct the parent training. How should you respond? So you're in a situation as a technician, right, where if they ever say you, by the way, you have to assume that you're a technician unless otherwise specified, right? So in this case, you're a technician where the analyst is asking you to conduct a parent training because the parent was confused about the new behavior plan. Now, what do we know about behavior technicians and your role in parent training? Well, you are there to assist, right? You're more than welcome to assist. And given permission, you can use or implement some sort of parent training. Now, are you required to? Not necessarily, because that is not necessarily your role. So given this situation, you've got a choice. How should you respond? A, conduct the parent training to the best of your ability. If you choose to do the parent training, absolutely, right? Absolutely do it to the best of your ability. As always, we read all of our answer choices, though. Is there a better response? B, only conduct the parent training if you feel comfortable and competent. Yes, you only should conduct this parent training if you feel comfortable and competent. A is saying, well, go ahead, even if you aren't comfortable, even if you aren't competent, try your best. No, if you aren't comfortable and you aren't competent doing independent parent training, don't do it. It's not your role, and you've got to be competent in whatever you're doing. As a technician, if you're uncomfortable or you don't feel competent, you've got to speak up. Don't go in there and just give it your best, right? Because that can only harm the client. C, refuse to conduct the parent training. No, it's a stipulation, right? This isn't black and white. It isn't go in and conduct it no matter what, and it isn't refuse it no matter what. It's make a decision. If you're comfortable, if you're competent, then go ahead and do the parent training. So what we're looking for is B. With an ethical question, this is similar to an ethical question. It's more of a role question, right? But we're also talking about competence. Ethical questions, you want a strong answer, okay? But you don't want something that's too strong, right? Because A, conducting the parent training to the best of your ability is saying, well, I'm going to do it no matter what. C is saying I'm not doing it regardless. B is somewhere in the middle where I can do it if I'm comfortable and if I'm competent. The Stanley Cup starts tonight. The Vegas Knights are trying to win their first championship in franchise history. If you wanted to know how many years the Vegas Knights have been around, what measurement would be best to use? Okay, another measurement question. Let's continue on our measurement questions by identifying what are we trying to measure, right? In this case, we're not trying to change anything, which makes it a little bit easier because we just have to figure out what we're measuring. So we know the Knights are trying to win their first championship in their history, and we want to know how many years they've been around. So this idea of how many, what do you think? I'm thinking of some sort of count, right? Our previous measurement question, we were thinking time. Now we're thinking count. So A, rate. Rate is frequency over time. We don't need rate here because we simply need a simple count of how many years they've been around. So how are you going to find that? Well, you're just going to use a B, a simple frequency measurement. Just count how many years they've been around. That's your answer. What about C, permanent product? We don't even need a permanent product from this. I'm not sure what permanent product you might use. All you're going to do is count up how many years they've been around. You want to use the simplest measurement possible. That's going to give you the best result. Okay. And frequency is the simplest measurement that's going to give us the best result. And then D, latency. We're not measuring time in between SDs and responses here. There is no time. Pick the simple measurement that's going to give you the intended data, right? And the data we want is how many years have the Knights been around? Let's count it up. Let's take a frequency. Boom, there's our answer. I jump up and down in excitement after getting an A on my exam. Later, I jump up and down for exercise. After that, I jump up and down to try and see over a wall. These behaviors share blank, but have different blank. Okay, so you're jumping up and down in excitement after getting an A on your exam. So what is the topography here? You're jumping up and down, right? Why? Because you're excited. Okay. You then jump up and down. Why? For exercise. So the topography hasn't changed, but the reason has. Then you jump up and down again to try and see over a wall. So again, topography, the same, reason is different. And that's very common to have behaviors that share topography with different functions. It's why we don't define behavior by the topography, and it's why it's so important to identify function for this reason here. So what do all these behaviors share? Let's start there. Magnitudes. Well, we don't know the magnitudes, right? We don't know the intensity of the jumping, okay? We just know what it looks like, which is jumping up and down. So B and C, functions, well, we know they don't share functions, right? Because they're all happening for different reasons. They share topographies. So D has to be our answer. These behaviors share topographies. They all look the same, but they're happening for different reasons. So they all have different functions. Not uncommon at all. It's why function is so important, because you cannot define behavior simply on how it looks. Deprivation of a reinforcer would most likely have what type of effect for your client? All right, keyword here is deprivation. When you hear satiation or you hear deprivation, you have to think motivating operations. And what do motivating operations do? Essentially, they make you want or not want something. They're changing the value of a consequence, okay? And when the value of a consequence changes, so does your behavior temporarily. If that consequence is more valuable, you're going to start engaging in behaviors that are going to get you that consequence. If that behavior is less, if that consequence is less valuable, you're going to engage in behaviors that, or you're going to not engage in behaviors that get you that consequence, right? So it's all about that value of the consequence and how it affects your behavior. So if we have deprivation of a reinforcer, what's occurring? Well, we're not getting enough of the reinforcer, right? That reinforcer is either being withheld, or we don't have access to it, or being deprived. So if you're deprived of something, what is likely going to happen? A, an increase in value for the reinforcer. Sure, if you're deprived, the value of that reinforcer is going to go up because you haven't had it in a while. So if the value goes up, what do you think your behavior is going to do? Well, your behavior is going to increase as well, right? Because you want to go ahead and gain that reinforcer. If you love pizza and you haven't had pizza in 5 days and the value of pizza is now very, very high, you're going to start being more likely to engage in behavior to get that pizza. So A looks pretty good. Let's read all of our answer choices. B, a decrease in value for the reinforcer. We know the deprivation isn't going to decrease the value, right? Because we're not getting enough of it. C, an increase in value for the reinforcer. Okay. And a decrease in behavior to gain the reinforcer. Well, if the value of the reinforcer goes up, it's much more likely that you're going to increase whatever behaviors gain access to that reinforcer. And then D, a decrease in value. Well, we know it's not decreasing the value. Deprivation will likely increase the value of the reinforcer and then increase the behavior, usually that gains that reinforcer. Okay. Motivating operations can be a little tricky. Just remember, motivating operations essentially, very basically, make you want or not want something. If I'm deprived, I want something. When I want something, my behavior is going to increase to try and get that thing. And then finally, how long must you and your RBT supervisor retain supervision documents for? So pretty standard question here, and it's just kind of a general guideline about retaining documents. And the general guideline, so this is not much of an applied question. It's more of a fluency, just do you know it or not question. And generally, the accepted answer here is going to be 7 years. How long should you keep documents for in case you get audited? 7 years. Generally, the accepted answer. So, as always, check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. Make sure you like and subscribe. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.